Welcome to the DevLaunge Podcast, bringing you insights from industry experts on how to grow the digital agency you love. In this episode, we're covering a variety of agency financial topics, including strategies for overcoming financial plateaus, cash flow management, rethinking pricing models, and also planning for a successful future. Helping us to do that is my friend and fellow fractional CFO, Michael Wark. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, for those of you who don't know, Michael is a chartered accountant in Australia, and he's also a fractional CFO with over 20 years of experience in the industry. So he's the CEO and founder of Trimline, and in that business, you specialize in digital agencies. Is that right?
That is correct. We're all in on agencies, and the majority of my client list, surprise, is in Australia. Have had an American client previously, but most of our list is here. So it'll be really interesting. I'm really excited for this chat to compare how the two markets are going, and we're both in the same game, but from different countries. So I'm really excited.
That's right. Yeah, I've had another guest on the show who's also from Australia, and he runs a SEO agency. It's really interesting getting his perspective on the Australian market in contrast to the U.S. market. He's starting to get a little bit of exposure in the U.S. market as well, but lots of interesting things to talk about. I think the thing that's top of my mind as a fractional CFO, a fellow fractional CFO, I'd love to pick your brain on, is just to kind of like catch me up to speed from your perspective on like, what was it like for 2023 and 2024 serving your agency clients? What were you seeing among your agency clients?
Well, the States and Australia is linked in many ways, as you know, Tony. We've got a lot of security packs, but we also are exposed to interest rates. And I think both our client lists probably felt, well, especially in Australia, that those higher interest rates, everyone felt the pain last year. A lot of the big corporates were cutting down on their marketing spend, so all the big corporate tier one clients that everyone loves to service were spending less, and that naturally flowed down through to digital and marketing agencies. It was just less budget to play with, and it was a harder year in business. So, like speaking from experience, I had to help people restructure staff last year, which is my least favorite part of the job, but it's an essential one if we want the agency to last for the long term. So last year I did a bunch of that for a few clients to make sure we kept our margins intact and had enough cash to get through. And sales were harder to come by. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. People were working harder for less budgets, less money, smaller retainers. And even up until the end of last year, people were pausing stuff saying, look, we love you. We love your agency. We just don't have the budget right now. Mm-hmm. So my read of it was just a flow through of the economy tightening, interest rates finally kicking, everyone going into a bit more scarcity mindset. And that flowed through to agencies who feel it the most because, as I'm sure you know, everyone cuts marketing first when they're going down through their P&L.
That's right. Well, and that's kind of one of the value propositions of working with an agency, right? Is like you have that variable cost as opposed to something that's like a fixed. You having like a whole marketing department or somebody like that in-house for these larger companies. You're talking about restructuring. Obviously, I know what you're meaning by that, but would you mind just unpacking? Like when you say you're working with your clients to kind of help restructure them, what does that typically look like, or what did that look like for you in 2023 and 2024?
So restructuring was a polite way of saying cutting headcount, cutting staff, or releasing the lower performing team members back into the market where they find a better fit job for them.
That's a very PC way. Yep. That's a very PC way of saying getting it.
Yep. I know. And restructure is a bit corporate jargony. I get it. But it is also kind of accurate because like a big part of unlocking profitability from my perspective is getting the team mix right and getting your pyramid right with the founder at the top, middle management, and then the technicians and highly billable people, and making sure that's not out of balance. And often it comes from that middle tier that are getting paid a lot but not doing a lot of billable work. And I think, for any agency employees listening, the old adage of being directly connected to revenue makes you a lot harder to fire it's true. So when I talk restructuring, I'm talking about getting the team mix efficient for this tough new financial future, which might mean cutting some people who aren't contributing a hell of a lot to revenue, but were nice to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a good friend who's in strategy was in strategy in an agency here, and that dried up last year and they got let go. So there's an example of what I'm talking about.
Kind of that restructuring and all that kind of stuff. And so, I guess like in your experience, did you see? I mean, because you've been doing this fractional CFO work for quite some time. You've been seeing agencies, so you saw that like massive uptick that happened back in 2021. I guess with the people you were working with, the agencies you were part of, I guess did you notice, like, did they participate in that crazy hiring craze, or did they stay relatively even keel? They just were paying people more. What were you seeing?
No, talent was super hard to come by in those days when interest rates were close to zero. Definitely. And I saw that, and we had trouble finding good people. Although, to be fair, finding good people is always hard. Finding like proper A players, they're not everywhere. So, that is always a challenge. But particularly in that period, people were hiring, they were landing big clients, people were spending money, and I connected back to when money was cheap and everyone was trying to grow their business. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. With, I guess, okay, so we're talking a little bit about just financial hurdles and struggles that, a lot of agencies have been facing 2023, 2024. And I think the big question, I certainly get asked a lot, I know you're probably getting asked this a lot too, is like, okay, now what? Right? Like we've hit either a financial plateau, like you said, maybe there's revenue's just been harder to come by. You had to work a lot harder to get that revenue. What have been some strategies, I guess, as of late that are helping your clients break through some of that plateau that they've been experiencing the last couple of years?
For sure. Depends how you look at a financial plateau. I see them as kind of essential to get the back end improved. Often I see delivery systems break, or things start to break through crazy growth periods. And the smart agency operators that I'm working with are using these slightly quieter in terms of growth, in terms of top line, to shore up how they're tracking time, their systems, their delivery, automating as much as possible. So working on the business, but in a smart way to get more efficient, to set themselves up for the next period where they can just hit go and they'll add clients and it will be so much smoother and their churn won't tick up. Because that's often what I see in those crazy periods of growth, is that things start to break, staff start to miss stuff, and people start to leave. And so you still might be growing because you're selling more than you're churning, but that churn number ticks up because things start to break. So to break through that financial plateau, I'd look inward, get super efficient, get your client list world-class, cut any duds, and get, super dialed in on your systems. So then when the worm does turn, people do start loosening the purse strings, you're set up for it. So don't waste this pause, because I know in startup, in that SaaS world, you look at like, a software unicorn's share price, it just goes a hockey stick straight up. But service businesses rarely, in my experience, operate like that. It's people, there's complex, there's a lot of moving parts. So I almost advocate for base camp growth. Have a run, you pause, let the cash catch up, because cash flow struggles in those periods, get profitable, get the model sustainable, and then go again. And don't just fly so close to the sun with small margins as you grow, because you constantly got to keep investing in future costs. So that's how I'd look at the plateau that we're in, if you call it
It's such a healthy reframe, right? Because I think we can look at a plateau and we can say like, what have I done wrong? And maybe there are things we can point to that, have contributed to that, leveling out and lack of growth. But I love the way that you frame it, where you're talking about base camp growth, this idea that like you kind of need to get to those stage gates, because if you just keep on growing, exponentially without addressing some of these things, like you said, like your service delivery model might be falling apart, or it's only held together by duct tape. But you're saying like, in those plateau moments are really the times to kind of focus on making this operational model a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all get caught up in revenue being the number one ego metric, and everyone wants to say how big their headcount is and how big their revenue is. Those are the two dinner table ego-driven metrics. But in reality, like an efficient business where the founder's not getting pulled into spot fires and has free time for their family and is still doing a decent margin, for me, that's the dream.
Oh yeah. It's interesting. It's like you can tell an agency owner that's been around for a little bit longer, because they've been through that so many times, that really is truly their measure of success. It's no longer this whole thing of like, we need to just grow. Cause it's typically like an earlier on, somebody who's maybe left corporate and they're the first couple of years out of corporate and doing their agency work, where they're like, we just got to keep growing. And, yeah, you kind of get a little bit more sage as the years progress.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're talking about, really focusing on operational efficiency, and you already alluded to this a little bit, but would you mind unpacking from your perspective, what are some of the things that you're having your clients do to take advantage of that base camp growth, where they're at that plateau and they're ready to kind of focus on making things, tightening the screws a little bit? What are those things that they're doing? In what ways are they investing in their business?
So getting dialed in about how they track and manage their team, whether that's time tracking, how they're doing that, how they're managing their utilization and capacity planning, just getting a handle on those things, which are probably more in the operations bucket, you would say, but they're so connected to revenue. So getting that dialed in and a way to track their client profitability and understand what's happening in their business, that for me is takes a lot of work to get correct data, especially getting the team filling out time in the way that actually gives you some usable data.
Mm-hmm.
So doing things like that. And then all the other obvious things, automating as much as possible, getting a slick onboarding process, or, systemizing delivery as much as possible, processes, like all the classic working on the business stuff that most founders should be working on. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, as you're talking about that, a couple of thoughts came to my mind just with some of the clients that I've been working with. Definitely seeing one in particular who really moved to, maybe it's like a kind of an all-in-one platform, but something that's not only addressing their time management and time tracking, but it's also doing things like addressing their capacity and projecting capacity and integrating that in with like their CRM and all that kind of stuff. I know that there's a couple tools here in the States. I don't know if they're as prolific in the Australian market, but a tool like Parallax or Forecast app.
Yeah, okay. No, I haven't heard of them. I'll have to check them out. Parallax and Forecast app.
Yeah, and I think those would typically be for agency sizes that are probably like at a minimum probably 30 or 40 headcount or more. So typically not like the smaller agencies. They don't benefit as much from that. It's just the cost benefit's just not there.
So what you're saying is these apps are expensive, Tony?
They are quite expensive. Yes. You just kind of wish there would be something that they could have like the all-in-one type platform that's actually like affordable for the smaller agencies, but I just don't know. I don't know if they got that.
Well, those software companies have a CFO like us, Tony, saying, no, put up your prices.
Right. That's true. Dang it. Fractional CFOs. Anyways, but okay. Well, you said another thing that I think was really important to highlight, and I'm glad you're talking about it because this is another area that I've shared with my clients as well, which is even if profitability is there's not, typically you're going to have, after you've addressed your profitability, you're going to then have cash flow. You're going to see an improvement in cash flows, right? Because of the simplicity of the agency model, whatever you're making profitability wise, you're going to see that translate 30 to 60 days later in terms of cash flow implications. But with what you're seeing with your clients and just kind of making sure that everything is nice and tight, are there any other areas with cash flow that you're advising your clients need to get improved besides just fixing the profitability in the business?
Yeah, especially during the onboarding phases of working with a new client, I focus heavily on cash conversion cycle. So how quickly are they turning a new lead into cash in the bank and shortening that gap, whatever way possible. So for some people, that means speeding up the onboarding process. Don't do huge in-depth stuff. Just do the bare minimum, get them onto the first month, invoice them and collect it just to get the ball rolling rather than getting stuck in a big project to begin and losing momentum. Looking at their invoice terms, all the classic CFO things. Ideally for retainers, collecting monthly upfront in advance, especially for anyone managing media spend for their client. For me, that's a non-negotiable. That either needs to be on that client's credit card or we're collecting that upfront in advance. We can't be acting as a bank for our clients and spending media spend on their behalf. So looking at all of the things that potentially are causing a longer cash conversion cycle and trying to tighten those things up. So just the basics of getting cash in the door quicker. And then on the flip side, age receivables. I've always got my eye on age receivables, what's getting older, who's not paying, and making sure we're staying on top of that. So those are the classic CFO level stuff that we try and focus on. And those are the things that I think will stand the test of time. You have to stay on top of that and stay in tune with it. And then also another one some people do is paid onboarding. So trying to get a big chunk of cash up front and that. But Probably always the heel in my side is anyone building websites and project work for those. I'd love to hear your opinion on this, Tony, because I still haven't found the perfect way. It always seems to be a problem cash flow wise. Even if we collect 50% up front, the second half of the website project's waiting on client deliverables and like we can't collect. And I still haven't found a magic bullet there besides from collecting the entire website cost up front, but no one wants to pay for a website that they haven't received. So yeah, that's always the thorn in my side.
Man, I totally relate to that. And I think a couple things. First of all, when it comes to websites in particular, it's probably one of the most annoying when it comes to like the very last, right before you go live, because it's not usually the issue is not, oh, we found bugs, right? Like when you're developing an application, there's concerns around that, or like, the user experience, right? So things that for the most part, if you're doing a good job in your craft, you should be able to address well in advance of that go live period. You're doing UAT, all that kind of stuff. When you're doing websites, the issue with that is that you are so beholden to, well, who's writing copy for the website, and what does marketing have to say about things? And oh, by the way, all of these things have to coalesce at the exact same time. And there's always going to be that one person who's like, wait, we have to make this one more revision. And it's like, just keeps that going back and forth. So when it comes to like that project oriented revenue, especially when you have it as a fixed bid, it ends up being quite risky. So one way around it, I don't know if you guys have tried this or if your clients are working in this capacity, but moving away from it being a fixed project price and more towards kind of what our software development counterparts are doing, which is more of like a sprint-based price where it's like, we're going to be here as your developers, your web developers, and we estimate it'll probably be, however many months, 6 months of a build. But ultimately, we're here to help continually iterate on what it is that you've got here. And then you pay us based on whether or not we're still working with you. Yeah. So they have an incentive to try to, get their I's dotted and their T's crossed in advance so that they're not, continuing to experience this cost. But I don't know, is that something you guys have seen with your web agencies?
Yeah, I don't have any clients doing the sprint-based model at the moment for websites, but I have seen it for some who also do a bit of app-based work. So they kind of do coding for a couple of other things. Definitely. And funnily enough, I've engaged a designer for Trimline, my own business, and we're actually doing a sprint-based model for their work coming up for like,
I love it.
For graphic and logo and design and stuff. We're just doing like a design day pass.
Yes.
So shout outs to Budge Creative for that. So, it's obviously a model that works for a lot of people and it incentivizes for efficiency on both sides. I love it. That's right. Yeah. So I think that's really a good thing. And this is a perfect segue, right? Because I want to talk a little bit about pricing models. We spoke a little bit about it here when it comes to like project oriented revenue, a little bit about sprint based. What are some other pricing models you feel like are underutilized, or, when you're working with new agencies, there's just a huge opportunity to explore different pricing models. What would those pricing models be, and what have you seen work really well for your clients? So the classic answer I should give you, Tony, is value-based pricing is the future, and that is the best way to make margin. I've been helping agencies for 10 years now, and honestly, it's not so much in the pricing model, it's in the delivery. Like, you can say whatever price you want. Right? You can say this is value-based, but if you're constantly over-servicing, it doesn't matter what pricing model you are. You've broken your own model straight away. So for me, it's about getting some way of quoting accurately that will line up with what you can do in reality. And however you build those Lego blocks, whether that's cost plus and then give yourself a bit of margin, whether it's value-based. So for different products, my client's value-based price, like strategic, like a big strategy piece, I've got people charging $15,000 for that upfront. It's kind of like they're paid onboarding. And that's value-based, but they've made it super valuable and it is amazing. But it's templated, which is awesome. So it's not super long to roll out. But in terms of the regular retainer-based clients, I'm hesitant to say there's one pricing model that beats them all, because the best ones just do the job efficiently, consistently. And that's where their margins are. Because the number one problem I see is over-servicing, not stopping out of scope work, not upselling or readjusting as the retainers or the projects roll on, and not nipping that in the bud. So for me, it's more like the delivery side of spotting that, having hard conversations with clients, which agency owners aren't very good at, and then negotiating a win-win where you can still offer them this range of services, but you're not doing volunteer work, because for me, that's still the thorn in my side, especially with new people. I walk in the door, first kickoff call, oh, your labor costs are 70% of revenue. What's going on there? Yeah. So we just never quite seem to know how to do it. We're always busy. The team say we always need to keep hiring because we want a new client. So it's a story as old as time in the agency world, from what I've seen. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's spot on. I would even go a step further to say, you're talking about like people working beyond their scope. I would argue, I think part of the reason they do that is because they don't actually have clarity on what their scope even is, right? I mean, how many times has that happened where it's like, hey, it was a handshake deal, or like, I know this guy, and like, yeah, or the hardest one, which is, but look, they're going to be such a great client in the future. And so we just need to service them today. We just need to keep them happy today so that later down the road. And I'll tell you, the number of times where that has actually panned out to be true is very, very few.
Yeah.
Very few.
Do you know why that is?
Why is that?
I've got a theory.
Yeah, go for it.
People hate prices being raised on them. And agency owners don't like raising prices because they're scared they'll leave. Mm-hmm. And so once you've locked them in at this initial price, no matter what they said 6 months ago, they've forgotten that. They've just gotten used to your invoice being X dollars. And then as soon as you try and say it's X plus 20%, they're like, what? No, wait a minute. And then it's just natural human emotion. You don't want to pay more. And they forget that you made all those nice handshake deals and you're locked in. So
That's right. I
often encounter that when we're trying to like improve the client portfolio, and we're like, look, these guys, this bottom 20%, need to give them a price increase or move them on. And they're often the ones that move on because they don't want to swallow that price increase. Even though you've been over servicing them, over delivering them, they still don't see the value. So yeah, I think you dig yourself a hole right at the start when you do that stuff like that.
Well, and I think the issue too is that a lot of times when we go above and beyond, when these agencies are going above and beyond, they're doing stuff that's like a little bit outside of their realm of expertise, but they're like competent enough to just like at least check the box. The problem then becomes is when you go to talk with the client about raising the price, they're not just evaluating on what you were technically in scope to do. They're evaluating on all of the deliverables. And if they had a bad taste in their mouth from something that you went above and beyond, I mean, technically it was above and beyond, but you didn't do it quite to the extent that should have been done. If they were going to go with somebody who is really very competent in this area. And so then I think that gets back to the point of what you were saying before, which is they don't want to work with you at that higher price point because they've evaluated the total picture. And they're like, well, I don't want more of some of these bad pieces. So they're going to probably look at somebody else to do that for them.
Yeah, which taps into a big anxiety for agency owners, which is someone else coming in and stealing their lunch, which is why people end up adding more services they're not good at because they're like, well, we can just do it and keep all the other potential suitors out of the meeting room. So tricky.
Yeah. Well, I want to be able to play some devil's advocate here because I can see this in my own experience just with like how we construct our firm offerings, right? As a fractional CFO, my situation is that as much as I want to just do fractional CFO work, I find that some of the most valuable insights in my fractional CFO practice come from really good upstream data, which I can't get well unless I've controlled kind of what's happening in the accounting part of the world. So we take, I'm getting kind of meta here for a minute. We take those two pieces, accounting and finance, we combine them together as one cohesive service offering. I imagine that there's agency owners that are out there that kind of take a similar approach where they say, well, whether it's like, let's say a web agency, for example, they're going to say, look, like, yes, we make excellent websites, but part of the reason we make excellent websites is because we're marketing minded people. Right. And so we are a marketing enabled or a digital enabled marketing company or something like that. They'll frame it that way. And so you end up having us kind of two different skill sets under one roof. Is there a place for that? Or would you still say in your experience, you're typically going to get a lower firm or lower agency valuation because of kind of having your attention divided?
It all depends on the team delivering it. If you've got world-class team members in both those areas, then you're gravy. You're all good and it's amazing. But if you've got, like you said earlier, someone who's stretching at the edge of their knowledge and taking twice as long to work it out building the plane whilst flying, that might be good for the first iteration, but unless you can systemize it, get efficient and be really good at it, then that's a losing strategy. So I would say that's a big cop out, but it just depends. I've seen clients who are really good at one or two pillars because the heads of those departments are rock stars, and they've still got like maybe three or four pillars. Like the other two in the business aren't as good, like their UX, head of UX might not be that good, not winning that much project work, but they still keep it there because it looks good on the website. And even though it's not a big revenue generator, they still persist at it for the bigger picture. So generally, I like people having multiple product offerings and revenue streams and a mixture, ideally majority of retainer with some projects across a couple of areas. But, the more and more I read at the moment in this new future of AI, that, it's agencies who are niched and are super good at their one thing will be the winners. So I guess time will tell. I don't have a crystal ball. It's hard to know.
Yeah. I mean, I think you said something really good, though. I want to pull on that thread. You said it depends on who's over the heads of those departments. And I think what you're getting at there is the who on your team plays a huge role on whether or not you're going to be able to be successful in that. Because, if you have just like a contractor who works part-time, who's a rock star in this, but they're a contractor, they're not somebody who's like a part of your core team, that is not going to be a core competency for your agency. So really assessing who are my core people and what are my core people capable of. And then maybe then asking the follow-up question is, if we really feel strongly we need to offer this thing, do we have a job opening that we need to be hiring for or something to that effect?
Yeah, absolutely. You've hit on a very hot button issue for me, Tony, because recently had a client where they had a rockstar SEO person, kind of the head of department, but they were a contractor, and they recently ran off with a couple of the big clients and stole it for themselves, which happens, but it was given all trust. It was all beautiful. And then this person stabbed them in the back and ran off with a couple of clients, which was disappointing. And we knew it was a business risk, and it's kind of a trade-off, right? It's nice because it's a contractor, so you can cut them whenever you want. So there's an advantage for the founder. They don't have that payroll risk, or that wage risk. But then the downside is they're not as committed to you, and that those things can happen. I've seen both sides of that. But getting people, the high-performing people, on your full-time team and incentivizing them properly is definitely, once you know that's going to be a core pillar, that's a no-brainer once you can afford it.
Totally. Yeah. I'm just thinking one of my clients in particular, when we were first starting to work together, one of the things that they had talked about was, we're like a marketing agency, but we're tech enabled or something like that. And I'm like, your whole history was you were WordPress developers. You guys were like rockstar WordPress developers. What's this all about? And as we kind of pulled back the layers, what came to the front was they had an amazing and incredible contractor. I have a ton of respect for this person. But they had a great contractor, and this person was very winsome in their approach to saying, like, look, if you really want to get better valuation of your work that you're doing, you got a couple marketing in there. You have to be the full package. And so because of it, they went down that path. And I think we've since kind of walked that back to really just let them focus. Because I think with the point you made, which is the thing I've also been hearing, is that especially with this, how AI is going to be playing into how agencies deliver their value, having those people who really know something, one specific service really, really well, is going to be the game changer and really the differentiator between, I think, honestly, the agencies that make it and the agencies that don't.
Yeah, definitely. Because there's such a low barrier to entry for agencies. So there's a lot of dud ones out there. There's a lot of bad ones. So I think it's essential for a bit of a cleansing and for letting the cream rise to the top. It's better for the clients as well to have that. So I guess we'll just have to see how it plays out.
Yeah. So there's two more areas that I would love to pick your brain on. They're slightly unrelated, but they're all related because it's financial related. But the first one is customer concentration risk, because this has been a big issue, I feel like, that I've been coming across as of late, and just conversations I've been having. I think it's one of those things that is a bit of a ticking time bomb that not many agency owners are aware of or considering. In your experience, I guess, like, what are some of the things that you are looking for? How do you typically talk with your clients about that risk in particular?
The rough rule of thumb that I use in terms of numbers is if a client is taking up more than 10% of your revenue, like the revenue they pay you is more than 10% of your overall revenue, then that becomes a risk. And it's not like you necessarily immediately fire them, but you need to manage it, assess it, and be on top of it, because the bigger clients, from what I've seen, honestly, sometimes the bigger clients are the least profitable because they're the most demanding. You're the most scared to lose them because it might be like 2 or 3 team members' monthly wage in one person in one invoice. So the potential to overservice that becomes so much higher. And that's what I see a lot of. So it's the risk of them leaving. You don't want them earning more than, bringing you more than 10% of your revenue, but also the risk of overservicing as well. And we spoke about niching. There's two sides to niching, right? Like I've got people who niche in certain areas. They're an agency servicing certain areas of the market. And that becomes a risk in itself as well. For example, if you're focusing on travel and COVID hits, or you're focusing on hospitality and COVID hits, you're up without a paddle. It depends how you want to look at the risk, but I look at it from a dollar value, but also an industry as well.
That's really good. So when you're thinking about concentration risk, you're not just looking at that the client concentration risk. You're also considering like market concentration risk.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Excellent. That's a really good point. And it's tricky, right? Because like on the one hand, you want to be able to, especially if they're less than 2 million or 3 million in revenue, you really want to be able to help them to really hone their craft, whatever the services that they're providing, and also like who they're targeting. Because like typically, at least in my experience, that's typically when they get the healthiest kind of growth trajectory is when they can kind of have a similar offering for all the customers that they have or the clients that they have. And the broader you take it, the more industries you're serving, the more watered down that service becomes a little bit. But it is that risk, right? It's like if we're going full steam ahead, like you said, in travel and hospitality, we're putting all our eggs in that one industry basket. That could be a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Do you use any metrics to help, like in terms of key client risk? Do you have like benchmarks yourself?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you said. Anything that's above 10%. I'm actually doing this exercise with one of my clients who they were hit really hard from client concentration risk. And I just want to, for the listeners out there, pull back the curtains for a minute. It's the type of risk that it's quite sinister because you don't realize until too late that it's an issue. Right? Like usually you're like, well, this is great. We've got like excellent, tons of revenue coming in, and you're just looking at your total revenue, not considering, but like 50% of it's coming from one customer. And then that one customer takes a strategic change in direction. And then now what are you going to do? Like you have to now lay off like half your team or more. And you just think about like the negative spiral that then transpires, right? Because like so much of what it is to be an agency is how do we attract and retain high performing people. And if you then have to cut half the team, that's going to have a ripple effect on the rest of the team members that are left.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're in the process right now of kind of reconstructing that with one of my clients. And one of the metrics that I'm having them shoot for long-term is, I don't know if there's another word for it, but I'm calling it the client concentration risk ratio, to basically say that if you aggregate all of the clients that constitute a concentration risk, that number should be no more than, I'm saying the ideal is no more than 30%. Because you and I both know, like, you're still going to have a couple, like one or two of those larger enterprise types clients. Like inevitably it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you want to give some
more money, and
right.
You're not going to say no to a big chunky contract, right?
Exactly. So you still want to give yourself some space. And I'm saying, okay, up to 30% can be in that bucket of client concentration risk.
Yeah.
But we're just working towards transitioning towards that because right now it's like all revenue is within the hands of maybe 6 or 7 different clients. And like, that's pretty risky.
Definitely. And the other way to do it is just to find 5 more of them. And then you're gravy. You doubled your business and you're good.
Right.
A couple of things I just wanted to mention on it. What I do is part of in my forecast, I do monthly forecasts for my clients. I have another little sneaky tab where I've just exported previous month's revenue broken up by contact. And then we run a little pie chart graph off it, just right next door to it. Super simple, but it just gives you a visual breakdown of that dollar value that came in last month, what percentage and what client made up of it. So you've got a really nice visual way to be like, oh, that's the slice of pie that they make up. And that's a really easy way to keep an eye on it, what I do with clients. The second point I wanted to mention was also thinking about the decision makers connected to that revenue, because for some of my clients who service big corporates, they might have one decision maker and they've got like 3 brands they're servicing. So they've actually got more than 10% made up. It looks like they've got 3 different clients, but actually it all goes back to a house of brands. And there's probably only one head in that who decides on all 3 of them going with you or not. So there can be hidden concentration risk. So you've got to be careful of, like, on the client side, if someone leaves, are we going to be up having to bid and pitch for this project again? And who is that person? We need to make more friends with different people in the organization to hedge our bets. Because often you get brought on just through one contact you might know, but if they leave, you might be struggling.
That's really good. So you talked a little bit about this. You're talking about like managing concentration risk, and you alluded to it a little bit just now when you're talking about diversifying by just getting other contacts within an organization. What have been some other, I guess, mitigating activities that agencies have been able to employ to make sure that they are not perpetuating the client concentration risk, or even potentially even de-risking from client concentration risk?
The easiest way to do it is also the hardest, which is saying no to people who aren't in your scope, who are slightly outside it, but also offer you a little bit more money, and sticking to your core avatar at your core service offering price, and just not taking them on. It takes a lot of discipline to say no to more money, but usually this is the experienced players who have gone through that experience of landing a bigger one, working like crazy to impress them, over-servicing, maybe getting fired and being like, why did we just go through the ringer for back to square one? And then sticking on their core market that they know if 1 or 2 leave, it doesn't kill them. And they've got a pipeline and they know how to land more to steady the ship. So it doesn't cause those emotional roller coasters with them. That would probably be the most obvious, but also the hardest to do.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Who really loves to say no to revenue, especially when it's like, oh, this is like good revenue. I think about, go ahead.
Everyone's playing the brand game, right? You're like, I'm working with this brand now. I'm working with this brand now. And you're trying to leverage your way up to charge more money, to be more efficient. Your staff want to work on cool brands. So like everyone is climbing the ladder to a certain extent. So it's hard.
Yeah. Well, you think about another hidden, like honestly, cost that comes with a lot of times when our sole focus is working with large enterprise brands is it is really the time it takes to get those projects is crazy long, right? So like typical close rates, days to close a deal, 60 to 90. Recently, it's probably been closer to that 90-day mark. But you start working with these large enterprise companies, like that might be 120 or 180 days, sometimes a year before they'll ever land that deal. And so it's like, it can feel like a holy grail because it's like, wow, there's just like unlimited funds to pay us. There's a lot of costs that come with just working with those large enterprise accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen firsthand a few examples where these bigger corporate companies move slower, their accounts payable process is slower. So we're often having to chase our biggest invoice repeatedly. When they're like, oh, it's stuck, we need to get the PO, and then it's in our accounts team, we need the head of the department to sign it off. They give you all, and look, I've been in big corporate the first 10 years. I get it. It is big, it is slow, there's multiple people. But it just means that the small agency is having to wear the cash flow problems because this big corporate with bottomless pit of money up there isn't paying us on time. So there's downsides to it as well. They know they're the bigger fish. They can lean on you a little bit because they know how important they are.
That's right. Yeah, they've got all the power. Quite honestly, and interesting. You're talking about that. When I see that a client has not paid, if I know that that's a small business, I'm like, it's probably more so because they just lost it in their inbox. They're probably just like running around like a chicken with their head cut off. When it's a large company, I'm like, I'm pretty sure you guys have a directive to like pause or like delay a little bit, and you're just dragging your feet, and that just like always drives me a little bit insane. I'm like, oh, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, that's right. But some agencies, use sneaky little tactics to maintain a bit of leverage. They might own the ads account, so they have the keys to the kingdom, so they have a bit of leverage if invoices aren't paid. It's not like you want to use it, but gives you a little bit more power back in those situations.
Yeah, that is so true. And we could probably talk at length about mechanisms or means by which you can effectively and consistently get that cash flow. But you were talking about, owning the keys to the kingdom on the ads account, or honestly, it seems like low hanging fruit, but I've even just seen having a consistent escalation process for collecting on your AR is like, it's so simple, but it's so rarely implemented. Just like having hey, within the first 7 days, you're going to send an email if they haven't paid yet. And then the next 7 days, then you have the next escalation, and then you have escalation. And the final escalation is, look, we're not going to continue working until you've paid your account. Yeah. So that can be.
But doing it consistently, having someone whose job is that. It's not done willy-nilly when we've got a cash crunch. It's like, I look at, and I try and coach my founders to be like, we are training our clients what to expect and to pay us on time. We are teaching them the behaviors that we want. And so following up promptly in a polite but firm way is super critical to training them to know. And, when they're doing their accounts payable run, they'll be like, oh, they'll definitely hassle me. I'll put that one in now because I don't want that email next week. And they know, like, behaviorally that you will chase them. So they fast track you because they don't want to go through that pain.
Yep.
And it's not like you need to do it in a negative way. It's all done with love, but we're a business too. So putting that forward. And actually, one of my clients does this really well. They have, they're dealing with big brands, but they're still a small up and coming agency. They don't have an accounts receivable person, but they've created an alias. So they've got, Kate at marketing agency, which it's just the founder still sending them. But it's like, hey, just checking in on that invoice. So it takes it away from the founder chasing to this unspecified other person who's a lovely Kate who you don't want to scream at because she's very nice. And they kind of take it off their plate, in a way to appear bigger than they are, but also ideally get the money quicker.
Yeah, my accounting department. I love that. That's such a great idea.
It's better than just using accounts at marketing thing because it adds a human touch. I like having the name.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I really like that. It reminds me of there's a agency coach by the name of Max Trailer. Are you familiar with Max?
No, I'll have to check him out.
Okay, great dude. I had him on my podcast actually. One of my this season. I think it was like episode 2. Anyway. But he said a similar thing, only not necessarily about having somebody for following up for accounts, but more so for when dealing with more tactical work in an agency, rather than having it come from the founder or the strategist, have it come from an alias email address, so that there's a little bit of that separation. So there's I guess a perception change.
Yeah, definitely. I think it helps.
Such a smart idea. Okay. Well, one last thing I wanted to pick your brain on is something that I talk about all the time with my clients, and then I talk about it in content, and that has to do with the investment in client acquisition and our revenue generation systems. And so I think my question for you is, how do you talk with your clients about the investment in sales and marketing, whether it's rules of thumb for how much they should be investing or spending on that area, in terms of like, what do you feel like it tends to be the most effective mechanism for generating new revenue? What have you been seeing?
So from a numbers perspective, how I have that conversation as the CFO is looking at their ad spend as a % of revenue every month and tracking that over the past 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. What have we been spending in that area? And usually it's embarrassingly low and it's actually not enough. Some clients are spending too much, but often they're not spending enough in this area. And agencies are like a plumber with a leaky tap. They're not investing in their marketing and sales nearly enough. They're so busy getting results for their clients. So I always, in my dashboard every month that I deliver to my clients, I'll have a note on how we're looking in terms of our marketing spend, because that's a leading indicator on how the next few months are going to be. Because if you're not investing in marketing, things will naturally trail off. And there is exceptions. Maybe the founder's a rainmaker. They have a great, network and they don't need it. But generally, it'll catch up with you if you're not investing in that area. So like the rough rule of thumb I have in my head is, 1 to 2% barely anything, that 3 to 8% is pretty healthy. And then I've seen people spending in growth periods up to 15% of their revenue on marketing and advertising if they're going hard, especially for certain divisions, like, depending on the business. So it's a ranging anywhere from 0 to 15% of revenue. It just depends on how much return on that investment they're getting, because there's no point just throwing cash out the door that's not actually bringing you more money. So it's about the wise investment of that spend as well.
Yeah. So I want to peel back two different things here. So one of the things when we're talking with my clients and in my content, something that I talk about is typically I'm talking about higher percentage points, because the difference with my perspective on investment in sales marketing is I also include the labor cost, the internal labor cost in my sales and marketing.
That's neat. No, I haven't thought about that.
And the thought process there is that if you think about it, like at the end of the day, we always need to be making a decision on, does it make more sense to do this in-house or to have somebody else do it?
True.
Right? So like if on average you can prove, hey, we're spending about $8,000 a month of my time creating content, doing this, that, and the other, and all that kind of stuff. If I can show, if I work with a different agency to do this, or if I work with something else, some other service offering that can effectively take over most of this work, you could clearly show, well, we're already spending the money. We might as well just spend it more effectively.
Yeah.
When I include labor costs, I think we get to probably similar numbers. So what I'm typically seeing is the typical agency is spending between 3 to 8% when you include labor costs in there, which is really, really low, way too low. I like to say if you've never really built a RevGen system before, you probably need to be spending between 15 and 20%.
Yeah.
So, and then you can bring that down a little bit more once you've kind of gotten your feet under you. But before that point, it doesn't make a lot of sense you want to give it enough energy and juice to really go far.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then if the client like adds a full-time biz dev person, do you include that wage in that marketing line permanently? That's just part of the marketing spend.
Yeah. Assuming that their hat is they're exclusively 100%. Doing sales and marketing work, then I would say allocate it 100%. I think the challenge that I run into a lot of times, I don't know if this has been the case for you, is, especially for more boutique or small agencies, it's very rare to find somebody who's just doing the one role, right? Like exactly. Most of the time they're splitting between I'm also doing a little bit of project management, or I'm doing a little bit of, helping administer the, harvest time entries or something like that. So they're not just doing sales and marketing work.
Very true. Very true. And, I'm always advocating for everyone doing a bit of billable work because, as I said, if you're connected to revenue, you're harder to fire. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they should be doing a bit of that too.
Yeah, right. That's right. So as you are seeing, what people are spending money on, you've had a lot of experience seeing where people have invested money, and in theory, also seeing where they've gotten the biggest bang for their buck. Where have you seen areas where investments in ad spend, marketing have typically fallen short? And in what areas do you see they tend to have more of an outsized return?
That's so hard to give you a blanket answer because different size agencies targeting different markets. So that I don't know if I could give you an exact benchmark on that, because I've got clients who are super niche in what they do. They do one thing really well, but they do it for the top end of town. So spending money on ads won't get them anywhere. They're looking for coffees and introductions to the powerful decision makers in those big businesses. So their marketing spend is very different to an up-and-coming mid-tier agency who's focusing on fashion and wellness. They have they might have a more efficient system using a sales funnel and ads and booking calls and the classic, way to bring people in. That works because their clients are spending more time on Instagram and might come across them there with ads. So it's horses for courses on that one. And I don't want to speak out of school because I'm definitely not a sales and marketing expert. I look at it through, are we spending enough and what's the return on investment is kind of where I get up to. And then I let the experts take it from there. But I'm looking at the spend. I'm just saying, are we getting a return for that? Where are our new clients coming from? And usually it's pretty easy to uncover. We go, hey, for the past 3 months, where have our best clients come from? Which avenues? And let's do more of that. So I just look at the previous data and ask the question of what's working. And then we try and double down on that and cut the stuff that's not working.
That's really smart. And when you are kind of running that rudimentary return on investment calculation, it sounds like it's not like a super in-depth kind of analysis. It's pretty straightforward, or it's just it's more of an anecdotal, where do we find these people from? It's a loose attribution. Is that
correct? Yeah, I don't run detailed metrics on that, but if they're doing ad spend, obviously you've got your entire dashboard there for that. But we do sometimes track it through the lens of forecasting. We look at leads in, conversion rate of those leads, new dollars into the business. So for some people who want to track forecasting and future revenue in a more metric driven way, we then would go back and be like, okay, well, let's have a look at the CRM. Let's find the leads and see what our conversion rate is. And attributing $1 to those leads is the harder part, which is where it's a little bit gray area. Often if there's multiple touch points for that lead as well, it's like, yeah, I met him at an event, but they also saw my ad. Where do you put that? So
yeah, that's true.
That's why it's a little bit looser.
That's totally fair. And what you were talking about before, where it's like, it really depends, because some of the clients that you're working with, they work with very high end brands. And so running an ad isn't really going to do anything to kind of to penetrate to get to that account. But it reminds me of a conversation I was having with one of the previous guests. And he was talking about this approach of spears, nets, and seeds. The three S's or whatever. And the idea being is like, well, who are you hunting? I mean, it sounds bad to say it that way, but who are you hunting, right? Like, are you hunting an elephant? Are you trying to fish? Or are you going for like rabbits?
Yeah. Okay.
And so the size of your accounts, like if you're going for exclusively enterprise accounts, like you can be like your client acquisition cost can be pretty substantial because the overall value of that account, if you were to land it, is much larger. But if you have these really small, couple $100, maybe $1,000 per month type of accounts that are retainer accounts, but they're really small engagements, it might not make sense to do that level of, in-person networking type of stuff because it's going to be too expensive to do that on an ongoing basis.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's where I guess the best agencies that grow find their groove, find their client, and they've got an efficient way of bringing them on, whatever that is. So whether that's expensive lunches with the C-suite or whether that is cheaper sales funnels. Yeah. But honestly, I still see a big percentage of my new clients and agencies' new clients. It's still word of mouth. Like people still want trusted referrals. So doing an amazing job for your clients, for me, is the number one sales tip. And that will resonate out into the market when people see the results you're getting for people. And that good news travels.
That's so good. Yeah. I mean, like, as much as we want, and it's like we started at the very beginning, we were talking pricing, we're talking about value pricing. It's like, we can talk about the holy grails here. We can talk about like really clarifying your niche and your value proposition, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, time and again, in a relationship business, like agency models are, so much of what we do, so much of what agency owners are doing is developing relationships at scale, building trust at scale. And so typically it's going to be some more of that, old school way of doing things. The hope is that we can still create systems around it so that it's effective and efficient. So we're not just like riding a roller coaster on whether or not we get a referral.
Yes, absolutely. One of my favorite clients ever, who's such a savvy business operator, their perspective on this, and it applies to CFO business as well. And they said that service businesses is the art of expectation management. If you can set the right expectations at the start and deliver or over deliver, your business will be good. But people get into trouble when they go add too much cream to the cake at the start. They over egg it and they promise them the world, and it comes back to bite them later. So you need to be honest with your expectation management, but still get them excited, and then deliver on that, and there'll be a happy relationship there, and people will know that you kept your word. And it's such a simple way to think about it, but it's, I feel like it's so true. Yeah,
totally the case. Well, Michael, this has been a wonderful, we've kind of gone around a lot of different financial topics. And but the thing that's really interesting here is, as fractional CFOs, the number of times we talked about debits and credits and accounting, very, very little, right? Although, like, we still need to know the ins and outs of that kind of stuff. Most of the time, what we're talking about, especially when we're working with agencies, it's so much more about just the business as a whole and thinking about the whole system of what makes this thing run.
Yeah.
And like you talked about, having a model that's efficient and is optimized for gross margins and profitability from the outset.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the hidden secret of what we do, is that numbers are just the starting point. That's the beginning of the conversation. It's the strategy. It's the accountability. It's the operational aspects of how do we improve the business and grow it. That's why I do this. Like, I don't love looking at debits and credits. I love growing businesses that are sustainable and profitable. And yeah, that's why I nerd out on it.
That's right. That's right. You and me both, my man. And so as people have listened to this, I mean, hopefully they've found a lot of little tidbits that have been helpful for them. But if they wanted to go deeper into any of the topics that we've talked about today, or if they want to even just like follow a little bit more about like your perspective on agencies, especially in the Australian market, what's a good place for them to follow you and to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, I show up fairly regularly on LinkedIn. So if you search for me, Michael Wark, Wark. So I try and post there, 3 to 4 to 5 times a week. And then also on the company website, which is Trimline, TRIMLANE.co. That's .co. That's our company website. We don't post enough blogs, but this year I'm going to start trying to post a bit more thought leadership on there. But I don't know. Are blogs dead now in the AI world? Who knows? But that's the website.
I don't know. I was talking with the SEO, the guest before, and he said that it's not quite dead, but it'll require a little bit of revamping in order to kind of get. He was saying something about digital PR or something like that. Anyway, I have to go back and listen to the show notes for that. But
well, it's all about showing up in the large language models now, right? So you've got to tweak it and make sure you're getting shown there. Brave New World we're in. Hey?
I know, it's wild stuff, but all the more reason why it's really helpful to have a strategist at your side like Michael. So I'd highly recommend reach out to him, get to know him a little bit better. I mean, I assume people can reach out to you if they wanted to on LinkedIn. You're a pretty responsive guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Shoot me a DM. I'm always happy to have a chat or have a coffee if you have the time, for sure.
Well, Michael, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to having many more of these types of conversations.
Yeah, it's been awesome, Tony. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to our listeners. If you found value in our episode today, please leave us a review and tell your friends about us. If you're interested in being a guest on our show, as a digital agency owner, or maybe somebody with insights that can help digital agencies grow, head over to our website to learn more at equip.com/podcast guest. That's ACCQUIP.com/podcast guest.